Yeah, welcome everyone to A Little Perspective. This is a host Pranav and Nikhil, and we have a very special guest today. We have Steve McLellan. How are you, Steve, today?
I'm great, thank you.
So we'll get the podcast rolling by you giving a little introduction about yourself, just so everybody's on the same page.
Great, it'll be my pleasure. One of my favorite subjects is to talk about myself. I'm Steve McLellan. I'm a Regina resident, Saskatchewan boy. I have lived here all my life so far, so we'll see where the rest of my life takes me. 2 years ago, I retired from the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce. I had been there for 15 years as the CEO. Previous to that, I was at Tourism Regina. Excuse me. I was in the tourism world for about 25 years as executive director of the Provincial Tourism Association, as well as Tourism Regina. And then I spent 10 years in the tourism industry. I was a partner in a restaurant and bar at Kenosee Lake in Yorkton, and I'd managed several restaurants here in Regina before that. So long career, I think, but I retired 2 years ago, and I've been enjoying my next career as being a retired guy. So far, so good.
So how does like a retired day look? Because I know you've been like working from what sounds like almost 40 plus years.
Yeah.
So, like when that routine is completely gone.
Yeah.
So
What's
how
it
does your
look
day
like?
look? Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like when you're working. Every day is different, generally speaking. I get up without an alarm clock. I hate an alarm clock now. And when we worked, we really didn't have to use them often. We were up before them. But I hate an alarm clock now. So I don't sleep well when I know I have one eye on the alarm clock sort of thing. So I don't have to listen to an alarm clock. But I'll get up and we'll have coffee, breakfast, read the news on our phones or laptops or whatever it happens to be. My wife will generally take our dog for a walk, which our dog is very eager to do. And then we'll decide what we're going to do for the day, or we'll have plans. We have to go do some errands or do some work around the house or the yard, or I may have some meetings on some of the groups I'm involved with.
Right.
But generally, it's at a pace that's much slower than when we're working. I don't have to get up, be at the office, carry on meeting to meeting to meeting. We keep busy, certainly, but at the pace we want and doing the things that we want to do. So the pace is different, but it's every day, again, is a bit different than the day before, but that's okay too. Never boring. Never boring. If you're bored when you're retired, shame on you, I would say. Lots of things to do.
Shots fired.
Yes,
had
exactly.
We had a guest who had this amazing line. She said, "Only boring people get bored."
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, there's in a community, whether you want to volunteer, whether you want to go to, we talked earlier about the places like the Sandra Schmerler Center where you can go and exercise, you can swim, you can sit in the spa or the hot tub, the sauna or the hot tub, you can go to the library, you could get into the United Way has reading programs where you can be a reader for children. Food Bank is always looking for volunteers. No shortage of good things to do to keep your mind and your body active. It's just a matter of getting off the couch and doing it. And people need to, and most people do, of course.
Right. And also being part of that community.
Yes.
Just always staying true and close to your community.
Yeah, if your only community is CNN and CBC, television commentators,
Right.
excuse me, shame on you. Yeah.
Totally.
Excuse me, I'm
No, that's all
fighting
good.
a little
Oh,
cold.
yeah, no, all good.
There we go, part on the sound check.
So you also mentioned like you're part of some groups right now.
Yeah.
So I feel like work never leaves you. You always find yourself to keep busy.
Well, it's very good to keep your mind in the game to some extent in the business world. And so I'm a board chair of a mineral institute out of Saskatoon, and I'm a volunteer with Sask Polytech, who are looking to raise a bunch of money for a new campus in Saskatoon. And so those keep me busy and, as I say, kind of engaged with the business community.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I want to ask you about your time at the Chamber of Commerce, being a CEO of Chamber of Commerce, being in that public sector. How was the experience like?
It was fabulous. I've been blessed, though, in my life. For 40 years I worked. I never had a job. I didn't look forward to going to work in the morning. I never had a day when I'm, oh my God, I've got to find something else to do for a living. I was blessed. Partly my own doing, but many of the things we'll talk about today, I think, made that possible for me. But at the chamber, it was fabulous. We had a great team of staff around me that I had helped choose or chose. These were amazing people with incredible talents. We had the ability to work with fabulous members, business people from across the province, literally across the country and across North America. And so we'd learn from each other and share ideas and stories and so on. It was great. It was, as an advocacy organization, you have to learn early that when you advocate to government at whatever level, federal or provincial, you're not always going to get your way, or they're not going to go, fabulous idea, let's do that tomorrow, because there's bureaucratic processes. But once you get past that hurdle that they're not going to embrace your idea overnight, and keep, focused on the end game, if you will, the long game, it was great. We had great members, a fabulous board of directors. One of the challenges of working for a nonprofit, which was most of my career, 33 years, was every year I had a different boss, a new board chair. But in my 33 years of doing that, I loved working with every single one of them. Each one was different. Each one gave me different lessons. As I got older, I got to a point where I was older than the chair, and so that relationship changed a little. But each time, it was fabulous. So some of the best years of my life, clearly, professionally, were at the Chamber world. Yeah.
That's awesome. And you mentioned 33 years in non-for-profit.
Yeah.
Almost every single year, there's a new board member.
Yeah.
What's the most valuable lesson that you learned in these 33 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. There wasn't a lesson. Clearly, there was many. But as it relates to the chair, it is my job as the executive director to make sure that I always remember that the chair is the boss. I have a line that I used after some people ran into organizational challenges where they were running organizations and they hit the proverbial ditch. And the line is, organizations get into trouble when the CEO thinks that they're in charge, or when the board forgets that they're in charge. So my job as the CEO is always to remember the board's in charge, and my job is to make sure the chair of that board, the leader of the organization, knows that they're the leader, acts like a leader, and is served by me to allow them to be the leader, right? It doesn't have to be a situation where I have to have every answer. I have to allow them to lead when it's time for them to lead. They will allow me to lead when it's time for me to lead. But all the time, I have to remember that that chair is not there just because they got voted by the members to be the chair. They're there because they're the boss. Right. And that's important. And that gives them that leadership authority, if you will, from me. Right. And the organization. And I want them at the end of their term as chair to go, this was a good experience. I felt like I led. Right. I felt like we accomplished positive things as an organization. I felt like Steve supported my efforts. And I hope all 33 of those people over the years would still say that. But again, they were all good people and who worked hard. Different styles, clearly. Of course. But they all did great things. And I'm appreciative of that.
This reminds me of, you love this book. I'm starting to love this book too. 48 Laws of Power. Mm-hmm. And the first chapter in that book is you never outshine the master.
Right. That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I feel like you are like a living representation of that chapter itself, because you know when to lead.
Yeah.
Or when to give your leader in charge.
That's right.
Right.
You know when to lead, when to follow, right, and when to get the hell out of the way. As an executive of a Chamber of Commerce, as an organization, I was always, and I would say this often, I'm very comfortable standing at the front of the room, introducing the chair who will announce the program that we as staff have developed with members and member input, and obviously the chair's input, but let them take that spotlight. That's their role. They lead it. I'm also very comfortable standing at the back of the room when a minister of government announces a program or a change to a program that we've advocated for months or years, did a lot of work on, and they're taking the credit for it, if you will. Absolutely fine. My job as the CEO was to get them to that point where they would announce it. I couldn't announce the program change. They had to, and respecting that. The other piece that I think is important to your line about not outshining the master is respecting the office. The office of the chair of the Chamber of Commerce, I think, is an esteemed office. The office of a minister of the Crown, federal, provincial. The office of a councillor or a mayor of the city. The office. You don't have to agree with what the person in that office would say, but always respect that office. And the people within it will change. The mayors will change. The ministers will change. The premiers and prime ministers will change. But once we lose respect for the office, as a society, as a community, certainly as an organization, we're in trouble. And we need to be cautious of that. And that was something I was always conscious of. When we went to the Ledge building for meetings, as an example, I would always wear a tie, always wear a jacket, always refer to the minister as minister. I may know them well enough to be able to off-site at a golf tournament or something, refer to them by their first name. But when I'm meeting with them as the minister, it's that office, and I respected that. And I never lost respect for that. Didn't always like the people I was dealing with in those roles, but I always respected the office. Yeah.
That's so deep, because like I feel like that's something that's missing from today's society, today's community.
Yeah.
And I feel like you can speak on behalf of everything that's happening. Do you see that happening? That respect slowly losing?
Yeah, for each other, it's terrible right now. Now, I will get into this perhaps later on. I don't think the world's coming to an end. I don't think we have lost hope. And in your generation, clearly with the work that you folks are doing here, there's great things happening ahead, better than my generation ever achieved. And I say that sincerely. But I think we're at a crossroads right now in our civic respect for each other, and the ability for us to respect both the office and the hard work that people do. It is really easy now, and I won't pick on social media, but that's part of it. It's real easy for people to pick on leaders with a quick keystroke and say what an idiot they are. Unless I've seen, if it's a social media post as an example, unless they put their whole name down there and take credit for it, personally stand up in front of that comment, and unless they have had their name on a ballot or a position of leadership somewhere,
Totally, yeah.
I disregard it. They're in the cheap seats. I don't care what they have to say. If they're being totally ignorant, if they are being constructively critical, I care what they say. And so the civil discourse that's missing now amongst our leaders and amongst our citizens to each other and to leaders, I think we're at a crossroads. We have to smarten up. And all of our grandmothers should grab all of our generations by the ear and say, stop it. Don't talk to somebody else like that. So whether you disagree with the Prime Minister or the Premier, respect the office. And if you don't have a better idea that's better than just don't do that, shut up. Right? You're not doing the hard work for these people that have put their name on a ballot, have done considerable community service to begin with, earned themselves a place on a ballot, got the vote of their community, taken the hours that a politician works. It's considerable. And many of our Saskatchewan politicians, who may live in Prince Albert, every Thursday night, if they're a minister, they hop in a car and drive 4.5 hours. Every Sunday night, they do the same thing back to Regina. And while they're home for that weekend, they're not resting or going to the gym. They are attending events and meeting with constituents. It's very hard work to be a good politician. We need to respect that. We don't have to agree with their take on a policy, but we have to respect the fact that they've stood tall and said, I will run and I will accept the responsibilities of that role. And the civil discourse that's lacking now, they are acting like children at every level. And I would say from the very top in the country to the somebody with a telephone and a Twitter account or an X account. Shame on us for allowing it to get there. We need more thoughtful people with thoughtful ideas. And okay to disagree, but say, tell me why you think that, and I'll learn from you. I may not agree with you, but tell me why you think that. And then from that, I will learn, and maybe you will learn from me. Maybe we'll walk out of the room and still disagree, but we'll have learned something. People don't want to learn. They just want to put a little short phrase out that, to hell with this person or that person. We don't need cheap shots. We need deep thinkers.
And the saddest part is like they're all using like burner accounts anyways.
Yeah.
Like they don't have their actual names.
Yep.
That's not their true account.
Yep.
They don't want to get tracked. They don't want to get like, what's that word called? Like a face of backlash.
Yeah.
Right? They don't want to get like shunned from the society, so they all just hide behind like burner accounts. And like the second thing that you just mentioned about people just shutting up is like Nikhil and I follow this practice of living called Stoicism. So we like read a lot into it, and a Stoic actually has this quote that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Exactly.
So listen more than you speak.
Yeah. People who know me will be laughing as you reference that to me because I have a reputation for being talkative.
Oh yeah.
I have friends who, when I go into a meeting, one fellow would often say, "Oh my gosh, now we're not going to get a word in edgewise because here comes McLellan." And I would respond to him, at least then, if I'm speaking, something interesting is being said. We would play on that. But I'm a curious person by nature, so I do ask a lot of questions. I hope they're questions that are of interest to other people or to the broader conversation. I don't ask questions just to fill time. I ask questions because I want to know the answer. But that piece is very valuable in terms of that saying about the 2 ears and one mouth. But there's a corresponding piece to it now that I would take that and reference it to our eyes and our ears, because you can spend time learning or watching on YouTube and different things. You're not always learning from the truth, if you will. Even media outlets don't always have the truth. Different media outlets have a particular and often very slanted perspective. So if you're just listening, you're just watching, you may not get the truth. So asking questions, which is the use of the mouth, versus offering an opinion in short order, can be very useful too. Asking questions of people, why they say that, why they believe that, I think is equally useful. But clearly listening to people is a useful tool, and one I appreciate. I haven't always followed, but I appreciate the merits of it. Yeah.
I'm honestly super curious what you have for us over there.
Oh, over here.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, one of the things, and I've watched a couple of your videos and the shows. Exceptionally well done. Congratulations to you both for the initiative as well as the quality. And with the exception of me, the quality of your guests has been stellar. But a couple of things that struck me. One of them in Ben Tingley's interview. Ben's a great person, and he's got a fabulous business. And his advice of work hard, be nice, and do good work. I put him in the wrong order, I think, but that basic element is exactly right. Now, he's a bit humble. I think they do exceptional work, but you don't have to be, reach for the stars every single time or stop before you get to the stars. So I enjoyed that, and I made a comment to that because of all the business advice, one of the things that I've heard in the earlier podcasts, and I hear young people talking about it all the time, and older folks too, is how much time and energy they put into reading business books, right? And it's useful when you're at business school. And there's some great lessons to be learned in those books, no question. But I would encourage people to do things like you're doing, is talking to people who are in the business here. I mean, in one of the interviews, you talked with Bruce Anderson, who's also a mentor of mine and a fabulous mind, a great community person. I would encourage any person to spend 2 hours talking to Bruce Anderson versus 2 hours reading a book about Steve Jobs. It's an interesting story about Steve Jobs, but the world he was in and got to, how much of that is relatable to what we're going to do in Saskatchewan? You may create a technology company as an individual from here, and no question many people are. And it's not a matter of the size of the company, but the lessons learned that will get you there. There are so many incredible people here in Saskatchewan, in Canada, who's maybe not have written a book about it, but whose business is having a successful business and would be more than willing to talk to people of any age, new to business or not, about their story. And Steve Jobs has a great story, no question. Did exceptionally well, without question. But a lot of the other business books are in the business of selling books. If you learn something and make your business stronger because of it, that's nice too. But it's not the business that they're in. And no disrespect to them. There's a couple of books that I can refer to later that I think are useful for people to read. But otherwise, I would say, boy, I'll tell you what, spend as much time, or at least equal time, talking to people who have built successful community organizations or businesses here. And you know what? 99.9% of them that you call as a young person or a young business person in Regina or Saskatchewan, they're going to take your call. They're going to say, sure, I'll talk about myself. Like I jokingly said earlier on, my favorite subject. I'll talk about myself. We've got some great people who have done some amazing things in a marketplace, in an environment that is much more suited to the world that your listeners, many of your listeners, are gonna build their businesses in. Talk to those that did it here. Steve Jobs is a great story, but it's a whole different category than what we're dealing with here. Not better, not bigger, just different. Learn from what's being done here. And then Steve Jobs, his children will read your book.
Or maybe listen to our podcast.
Yeah, well, exactly it. Well, and your effort here in an hour or so in each of your lessons, I mean, guys like Ben and certainly Bruce, they've done it, right? They've done it here, and they've done it exceptionally well. And in different businesses, different styles of people, but both of them have done exceptional things. And both of them will sit down for a cup of coffee with anybody, anytime, and share what they've done. And you know, I'm not suggesting the people like a Simon Sinek and others don't have merit. I'm not suggesting that, but don't rely just on those cliches. And I'm not suggesting you two are doing it. I'm saying it much more broadly because I hear about it all the time. People spend all this time on these books and money on these books. And I'm saying, okay, have you gone down the street to the guys who's had that sign shop for 27 years? I was at a funeral yesterday and had a chance to talk to a guy who's got a plumbing business here in Regina for, I think, 34 years or 40 years maybe. Very successful. He's got it to the size that he wants it. He is at a point of curvature in his career where he's not looking to expand a lot, but he's done exceptional work, providing great service, as Ben has said, worked hard, did good work, and he was nice, and he delivered for his customers. He had a great business. Who's asking him questions about how he did it? That's the relativity that I think we're missing in too many conversations about business. And the Hill Business School does great work, and they do bring in some of these local folks, but Simon Sinek doesn't care about Saskatchewan. Bruce Anderson does. Ben Tingley does. Those are the people I think I would encourage young business people who want to be entrepreneurs. Talk to Saskatchewan entrepreneurs because we got some rock stars, large businesses and small. Anyway, I'd leave it at that. This is not an anti-buying book spiel. This is just talk to the folks who are willing to talk to you that are sitting in Regina now for they'll even buy the coffee in many cases. Learn from them. It's very useful. Yeah.
And that's what I love about people like Ben and Bruce, because when we reach out to them, they're happy to talk to us because, like, I think Ben was telling us this, if I see young guys like you doing something, I want to encourage more of that. I want to bring more entrepreneurship in Saskatchewan. Yeah. So that's what I love about people like them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they I mean, they see themselves in you two. They see themselves as entrepreneurs that had people that would talk to them when they were younger, who would give them clues and say, you're not on the right path or watch out for this sort of thing. So that's useful. I used to say at the Chamber World, and I was part of the Hill Leaders Council at the University of Regina, business people who would participate together with the students at Hill. And when I talked to a student and they said, I'm interested in getting into the world of, doesn't matter, mining engineering.
Right.
I would say, well, here's the name of somebody who is a mine engineer. Talk to somebody who does it, right? You don't have to commit that you're going to go into mining engineer and you're going to go into podcast or production. But if you want to, before you go that direction, find out about it by talking to somebody who's there. So I would give them the name and the number and the contact of the person. And I would say, call them and tell them that I gave you and I would know the person, of course. I would say, tell them that I suggested they call you and ask to meet with them for a cup of coffee or whatever. And I said, and I really want you to do that. And secondly, if they don't take your meeting, call me back. Because I'm going to call back to that person and say, listen, I asked this person to give you a call because I thought you had advice that would be useful. And you said no. And if it was only because they were on vacation or they were going away for a month or they're in the middle of a big project, okay, put it off for a bit, but take the call. But I said, if you're not prepared to take that call to help that person, then tell me who it is that didn't help you when you were 20 years old or 25 years old. take that call. And every one of them, I never had to call back to somebody and say, take the damn call, you jackass, because help these people out. Right. And I never had to make the call. Now, in fairness, sometimes the student might have been a little too nervous, but every time I said, I'll give you that lead. You use my name to say, Steve McLellan said that you may take time for a cup of coffee. I want to know what you do because I'm thinking about doing what you do. And I think many of those calls went through and many of those meetings happened. And that's good because we all, as we get older or younger, it doesn't matter. Even if somebody called you, I could call you two and say, listen, I'm interested in doing a podcast on fly fishing. You would say, sure, we'll tell you how to do it, right? It's even if it's on business, it's not competitors. It's how do we strengthen the community? So young can learn from old, certainly, but older can learn from young as well. So it's I've never had to call anybody back and say, why didn't you take the call from John or Pete or anybody? So that's good. I'm pleased with that.
Well, yeah. I feel like if you have to call back, you're talking the Liam Neeson voice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We'll call you.
Yeah.
You're the godfather of Saskatchewan.
I have very particular skills that I'm going to sit and talk to you for 11 hours. You'll want to die. No, it's and I think it's also a reflection of the community. People do want to talk to young people who are excited about what they do, and you know the reflection on that also is just the simple idea about how many people get into something, whether you want to be an entrepreneur or an engineer, or I've had people who want to be in tourism, and I said, well, before you went to school for 2 years or 4 years to be that, who did you talk to and learn what it's like? Well, nobody really. And then I went, well, shame on you, because it's not what you like is the conversation generally I'm having in tourism. I had it often, where they'd say, you know what, I wanted to get into travel because I love the idea of traveling. And they'd take courses and they'd become a travel agent. And they said, I don't get paid very much. And whenever I travel, it's I got to work 18 hours a day on a familiarization tour, a FAM tour. I said, well, didn't you know that going in? No, I didn't ask the questions. Ask the questions. One of the most important skills to have as a person nowadays, young or old, is to be curious. And if you're going to give yourself a path for education or a career, be curious. Ask people. And it's not because anybody who won't take that meeting or have the conversation because they think you're going to compete with them, well, you don't want to talk to them because they're worried about competition. They should be celebrating the fact that somebody wants to get into what they're doing. So being curious, asking people, asking questions. Don't just ask Simon Sinek, ask others that are more local as well. My last trash of Simon.
I think even Simon Sinek says that if you want to discover your why, ask the people around you.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't just look it up on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's going to give you like the most vague and like those answers that I feel like are very bookish and you can't really apply them in every single situation. Yeah. So, like, I want to ask you this one question, and this knowledge and aura that's emitting out of you, I have to ask you, have you always been this way? Like your upbringing, you growing up? Because like I feel like this persona that you have, this mindset that you have, either you have it or you don't. You can't just acquire this from like, maybe you could, I could be wrong. But those are the leaders that I love who take the torch, give it to their people and let them find their path.
Yeah.
But the aura and knowledge that you have, just where did this come to be?
Well, I've always been confident, and I often say too, there's a difference between being confident and arrogant. I try never to be arrogant, but confidence is, in my mind, would be somewhat defined by the ability to know that I could do it. Not know how to do it, but confident that I'll be able to achieve whatever it is. So that if it's an air of confidence, great. I haven't always had that in every situation, perhaps, but and it's not some kind of crazy lack of fear of failure or anything like that. But I think as you get more experience in an effort, whether it's soccer or swimming or business or whatever, in a particular area, as you know more of it, you've been curious, you've asked questions, you practiced, you've done your homework, if you will. That gives you an air of comfort and therefore an air of confidence that you can achieve it. There's an old line that says, whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're probably right. So having that confidence to go in and say, yeah, we can achieve it. I had another conversation with a guy the other day who has in Red Deer, Alberta, a machine shop, a welding shop. And he would have people come in from the oil field and they would say, can you rebuild these ladder system, hydraulic ladder systems that need to work at 40 below? And his answer was, yes, we can. And then the follow-up, well, have you done it before? No. But I know we can do it because I know we've got great welders, great designers, great technicians. So that air of confidence, not arrogance, is there because he's done his homework, he's confident in his people, and he's got good people around him, and it's what the business it's the business he's in. So I haven't always had the feeling that I can conquer every mountain, no question, but I've always had good people around me and a comfort that we will find success by doing those things that are important, working together and being prepared. So some people would take it as arrogance within me, but I try not to be that. My daughter would tell you that I have no ability to be embarrassed, and I could do anything in public and it wouldn't bother me. Now, what might embarrass her or my son or my wife, but that gives me the ability I could stand I've done a lot of emceeing as an example, and I could stand in front of a stage of 1,000 people or 60 people, and I'm never afraid going on. I'm never concerned about it because I go on prepared and I'm comfortable with the crowd and what I have to do and say I'm ready for it. I won't say that I don't have butterflies. An old line is that you're supposed to have butterflies in your stomach. The key is to get them to fly in formation before you go on stage. And so that's, again, being prepared, knowing what you're about to do, and not knowing how it'll turn out, but being confident it'll turn out just fine. That gives you a sense of confidence and not arrogance, but confidence. Yeah. And comfort, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So, of course, since you mentioned Simon Sinek, I have to ask you this. You've been working so many years. You've had such good leaders. You're a great leader yourself.
Thank you.
What's your why in life? Why do you get out of the bed every morning?
Yeah, it's a good question. The basic why for me clearly is my family, is that I can get up in the morning and do work that they can be proud of that I've done, and to contribute to their lives and their the roles that they play. I don't get up and say, my gosh, I had to go to work today to make a living, to pay the bills and so on. Early on in life, that's more important because you have bigger bills and so on. But it's for my family to be able to say what I did help contribute to the success of their lives and their health and wellness, if you will. And it also, allowed my wife and I, as it did her career, allow she and I to have a comfortable retirement, and knowing at the end of any given day that the work that I did and my wife and others who contributed, of course, was good work for the community. We weren't just moving a pile of bricks from one corner to another. We were doing work that made sense, that helped people's lives be better. That's part of the why. But at the end of the day, it would certainly focus back on my family and allowing them to say, they've built their lives based on the lessons that my wife and I have given them, and the practices we've given them, and the home that we've given them, and so on. All of that makes a difference. And that would be the reason why. Not money, not accolades, making sure the people closest to me are successful in whatever path they choose, or can be, and are, I guess. I'm very lucky. My kids are doing quite well, traveling more than me, and I'm retired. I'm supposed to be the traveler. But anyway, we'll get there.
Right. It's like what Joe Rogan says too. It's there's cake for everybody at the table.
There's cake, absolutely.
You got to bring the people up that have been with you since you were in the mud.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah. We used to talk about this. One of our leaders, my first boss at the chamber, was Dave Duchek, who's had a huge ambulance company in Saskatoon. A great guy, great visionary. He used to still does cheer for the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is his only weakness. But he had this vision for the creation of a Saskatchewan growth plan that he said, for my business to grow, our province needs to grow, and so on. And without getting into it in great detail, it was a great vision. And we developed this plan with great people, a lady in Moose Jaw who's brilliant. Kristen McKee is her name. She and I wrote this plan, and it said, here's the 20 different things we need as a province to grow. You can't just grow population without housing. You can't just grow housing without jobs. You can't, you need all these different columns to grow. Anyway, one of the things that we talked about at that point in time was what we called the magic Saskatchewan pie. And that as the pie got bigger, everybody could take the chunk that they wanted. And there was still enough for everybody else. And it wasn't a matter that, and there's challenges about some people making too much money or having too big of homes and so on. And our belief at that time, still functionally is the same belief, is that if you work hard enough and earn what you get and take a big chunk of the Saskatchewan economy money-wise, that's okay, because that pie continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. As we grow as a province, our population goes. The cultural, both of you are good examples of solid, amazingly positive introduction or newcomers to Saskatchewan. You're taking a part of that pie, and that's why you're here. Fantastic. That's what you're supposed to do. Take a piece of that pie, the money, the culture, the excitement, the business developments, the opportunities like this, and that pie is not getting smaller or less for anybody else because of anything you have taken as newcomers. And the same with my great-grandfather who came from Scotland. He took a piece of the pie. He created a homestead. Nobody else lost anything because of that. It made the whole pie stronger. And that's the mentality we need to continue to work with. And as Joe Rogan says, if you remember the people who you crawled through the mud with, who are strong enough to do that, or help bring them along, because they will have helped you through the early stages of, or late stages of a person's career, we're all stronger because of it. We all win when Saskatchewan wins, when Canada wins. And the best way to do that is not standing on the shoulders or the heads of those people, but to build upon what they have built for us. And again, my old adage of the magic Saskatchewan pie is, I think, absolutely true. Take as big of a chunk as you can swallow and handle, because that pie is still there for everybody else. And hopefully everybody does grab a bunch. I want a good job. I want a good business. I want my family to prosper. Fantastic. But you need to be able to, eat that piece of pie in terms of handling it. Don't just throw it away. So I can go on to what is clearly becoming a terrible analogy. But the bottom line is simply that the magic of Saskatchewan, Canada particularly, is that we can all do pretty much as we want if we're prepared to do the work. As Ben said, work hard, be nice, and do good work. Success will be there. Yeah. Terrible analogy.
No, completely. I love the genuineness because it's not that complicated.
No.
Like Ben said too, like those are like his 3 pillars of success.
Yep.
And it's nothing fancy. It's nothing like you have to run like a half marathon or something to accomplish this stuff.
Exactly.
It's easy stuff. We've all been given that values.
Yep.
From our parents, from people around us.
Yep.
The only part that's left is executing it.
That's right. Yeah. A point you just made now, and I want to emphasize this, is one of the business or life gurus that we don't always knowingly and intentionally, I'll say, spend enough time listening to is our parents and those around us, our family elders. I lost my mom just over a year ago. She passed away at 91.
I'm sorry.
My dad is 95, doing very well. And I've got to spend a lot more time with him in the last year. He's moved to Saskatoon and so on. But, these people lived lives that molded us. Whether we think they were doing this job and we want to do something else much more grandiose, doesn't matter. We have to accept the fact that much of who we are is built upon who they helped us be. And learning lessons from them and uncles and aunts and so on, family members, we can't forget those, shouldn't forget those people, because They may not have done exactly the job that you're wanting, but they have life lessons. They have succeeded in living to the extent that they have. So we shouldn't forget those people in terms of asking about how they did, why they did. I mean, how many people now know how their mom met their dad? Ask about the wedding day, those kind of things. Once they're gone, you can't ask those questions. Ask about what was their first job and how they like it. We don't ask those of our parents often enough, and I'd encourage people to do that.
This is something like as a kid, I'm learning at the age of 23.
Yeah.
Like when I was growing up, my mom, my dad would tell me, Nikhil, maybe you can do it this way. And I'm like, nah, ma'am, I don't think you know this stuff. I don't think you know this.
Yeah.
And now, because I'm more appreciative of them, because I'm not living with them, they're back in India.
Yeah.
Whenever my mom tells me something, Nikhil, you fought with your sister that day. You shouldn't have said certain things.
Yeah.
So whenever you say something, just think 10 times before it comes out of your mouth.
Yep.
Because once it's out there, you can't take it back.
Exactly.
And it just hits me now because now I realize that how wise these people are. And I took them for granted my whole life.
Absolutely. That's an amazingly positive business lesson that your mother didn't think to be a business lesson. Because when you're dealing with a client or an employee, if you're mad at an employee and you say something too quickly, or a boss or whatever, you can't take that back. That's in their ears and mind forever. So it's a good lesson, again, to my point a minute ago, and you're absolutely right. Appreciate it. Your mother did not say that to hurt your feelings. She said that because she thinks she can help you improve. She helped you learn to walk. She helped you learn to eat and all those sorts of things. And they want you to be a good person. And so those lessons are different than we'll learn from people like Ben and Bruce and so on, but they also rely on their parents for those lessons too. And let's not forget them. So there's a good example. You've given us a good example of a very, very good lesson from your mother. She should write more books than Simon Sinek.
What's your most cherished memory about your mom?
It's an interesting question. Well, I have many, and of course, when someone passes during the next year, you spend a lot of time sort of thinking about moments with them.
Yeah.
My mom and dad, they retired. They lived up north at a lake called Dory Lake, and so mom and dad would spend time there. And one of my favorite memories, of course, would be in the years when we would go up there for the summer holidays, and the last few years spend a little more time as we're retired. But at 4:30, we'd have happy hour with them. And she would be the first. Dad wouldn't drink much or didn't drink much, but he'd sit down at then and finish whatever tasks he was doing for the day. And a couple of the neighbors would come around, and it was a nice social time. And it was all somewhat based around Mom's watch of the clock. And she'd have one drink, and that would be it. But sit there and watch the lake or at the table, whatever the case would be, and sort of... she lost her hearing a little over the years, but she'd still sort of command the room. And that's one of my favorite images I think of with her. And not because of the time or the drink, it was the fact that it was a ritual, and that was important to her and therefore important to me. Yeah.
Of course, losing someone is the hardest pain you could ever imagine in your life.
Yeah.
I'm just really happy to see about your life is that when she went, she saw how great of a man he became.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, she was a champion of all of us as kids, and no matter what challenges we had or successes we had, she treated every kid equally. And all of I have two sisters and a brother, all have done well in their lives. We've all had different times where things haven't gone as well as we might have hoped, but generally our lives are good, and our children are doing well, and so on. But she was a big supporter, and like a mother, she had 4 kids. She treated us all differently, but all fairly, and it was good. She was a good person and a good model. She was also. This is another thing that I'll think about my mother. When she grew up in Weyburn, and she lost her dad when she was about 14, and her mother, who was also a rock star business person, rock star individual. In the mid-40s, she had to say, okay, I've got to take over the family business. It was insurance. learn it and work it because I got 3 kids to pay for. And that's what she did. And she was very successful in business. My grandmother, Grace McKee. And my mother was an adventurer because of that sort of independence, I think, that her mother showed her. And when she was in her early 20s, she and 4 other Weyburn kids drove down to New Orleans, wanted to see New Orleans. And when you drive to New Orleans, it's a long way, and it's across the United States and in cars that weren't what we have now. And they went down there and they wanted to see this radio show happen that they heard on the late night radio in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And she was quite an adventurer. And you know, my kids have become adventurers too, to see the world. And I think part of that is the lesson they learned from their grandmother. But yeah, again, back to the lessons we can learn from the people who are closest to us. Sometimes we think we have to leap the fence because the grass is greener with the people that have more reputational success. Well, I tell you what, there's some great lessons that we can learn from the people around us, and I encourage people to do that. Yeah.
So, what's something that you learned from your mom and dad both that you've incorporated into your children's life?
Well, that's a good question as well. Humor is very useful. It can make harder situations easier.
Like dad jokes?
Yeah, lots of dad jokes. Yeah, exactly. But I think being ready, able, and prepared to help people. My parents were always, the go-to people for things at Dory, whether it be as simple as a ingredient or a recipe or an idea. A mom's shoulder was one that people would cry on if somebody had a problem. Dad was the first one to be called upon or offered his assistance in terms of helping somebody with their renovation or car repair, whatever the case would be. So helping people and a sincere respect for individual, I think, was useful. A good lesson. I mean, they didn't hate people. They disagreed with politicians, and as dad gets older, he has less respect for the office that I referred to earlier, perhaps, but he's earned that right, I guess. But yeah, they're good. They were good people and good to each other and good to the neighbors and certainly good to us. So from that perspective, they worked hard, they played hard, and they were good to everybody around them. And I think that's a good lesson to carry forward, that it worked well for them, and they had a long marriage, 68 years, lived a long time, and many, many happy days in their lives. That's a good model to follow. Yeah.
So you have all these amazing values that were passed on to you by your parents, your grandparents.
Yeah.
Like when you were growing up, other than your grandparents and your parents, was there somebody that you really admired?
Some of my earlier bosses, and I took a hotel administration program at Sask Poly. It was then called SciAst or Kelsey Campus in Saskatoon. 1977, I started it. And there was a guy that was there that was our first program head for hotel administration. He epitomized what I thought then was a hotelier, a hotel manager. He was both very well trained, very well informed, great experience, but he would say you can provide service without becoming a servant. You didn't have to bow down to your customers in a hotel or, in my world, the restaurant world, but you could still provide great service and hospitality to them. He would provide lessons like that. Some of the bosses that I had, I've learned a lot from. One of my first sort of management jobs was at an Imperial 400 in Yorkton, and the guy who was the manager of the hotel was, a few things stand out that he did with me that were great lessons. Compliment, and actually it's a funny thing. We had a hotel guest who had I was the dining room manager, the only manager on duty, and the hotel guest, the hot water tap came out of their room, out of their tub, and it was spewing steaming hot water.
Oh, wow.
No way.
So I was 19 years old, didn't know what to do, wasn't a plumber, didn't have a clue, but I reacted to it in a manner that got the water in the hotel turned off, figured out how to do that, got them another room, did all that kind of stuff very quickly, and the family was happy, and it turned out well. And the Ron was the manager, and he, asked me what happened and all that, and he tapped me on the shoulder. He said, "Good job," tapped me on the shoulder, and that was it. That was all we had to do. And I remember that because it was a very positive comment. And the piece on the shoulder was interesting because in later years I read a book. Yes, I did read business books.
Yeah.
About the 1 minute manager, and there's a lesson in there about talking to somebody with what's wrong, tell them what's right, and then touch them to in an appropriate manner in the shoulder, if you will, or whatever, to let them know that it's going to be okay, kind of a thing. And so I relayed that 1978 lesson, compliment and touch, to a book I read in the mid 80s that said, okay, somebody else actually wrote this down, and it's a good practice. So I've had many mentors unofficially. Many of the chairs that I worked with, I still think of lessons learned from them. But I've been blessed. I've had many, I guess.
So like how Nikhil mentioned earlier on the podcast, like you've been blessed to have these exceptional leaders around you, and you yourself are such an exceptional leader.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to ask you, what's your definition of an ideal leader, and what should people strive to become?
Yeah, so there is no such thing as an ideal,
No?
Because that would mean only one model. Mm-hmm. I have seen exceptional leaders, but they come in all shapes and sizes and attitudes. One of them is a kind to people. The lessons learned, they have to be people who work hard themselves. And as Ben said in his interview with you, that he's not only going to give the dirty work to somebody else, somebody who's prepared to do it, who has done it, right? Don't have to do it every day. A CEO does not have to shovel the sidewalk every single day just because it's knows to prove that they can do it. But they have to do it and be prepared to when someone else can't. You have to be nice to people. Because if you're an asshole to customers behind their backs, or to staff behind their backs or with them, nobody will respect you. So you've lost there. And you also have to do good work. You have to demonstrate that the quality that you will do yourself and try to achieve is the standard for the people around you. The other thing I'd add to, instead of giving Ben all the credit for the good ideas, although he had some great ones, was empower people. One of the things I learned to do well was empower people who are good people that worked around me. And it wasn't because I was lazy or didn't want to do with that, but I just trusted them. And I have an example I use often. We had a lady who, over her career and mine, we worked together 4 or 5 times, different jobs, different places, different years. And she was our event planner. And she would come to me. She said, I got a couple of questions on an event. And I said, okay. I said, I'll have an opinion, but if you think you need it, come to me. But if you don't, that's okay. I trust what you're going to do. And she'd go, okay, no meeting necessary. And she'd go ahead and do it. And the event, of course, would be fabulous. Now, I'm an old tourism guy, restaurant guy. So on events, I've got all kinds of ideas. But I trusted her. I empowered her, if you will, to do that. Now, when she needed a decision or bounce an idea off me, always I was there. But the example is one where I think I empowered people. And I used to say, if it's done, I like it. Even if it's not exactly the way I might have said it, if that's the way, if you've done it, you've used your judgment and you've not just flippantly gone off and done something, bought $1 million worth of plastic bottles. If you've done it in a clever way and an intentional way, using the skills that I know you have and you have, and you've done it, I like it. And I'll support you for that. I've empowered you to do it, and I'll also backstop you and support you when it's done. And I think that's the epitome of a good leader, is somebody who has good people around them and allows them to do good work. Don't micromanage. Do not chastise when it's unnecessary. And do not think that every idea is the one I've got. At the chamber, I would come up with all kinds of things, or somebody would have a program or an idea. And I would walk down the hallway, and I had colleagues that were, sadly for them, in the closer office. And I said, hey, I've got this idea. And they'd go, not a good idea. Because this, and this. Mm-hmm. And I'd go, okay. And I move on. right? Sometimes we carry it on to a longer conversation if there was better rationale or whatever the case would be. But I trusted their judgment when they said, "Here's what you're not getting, Steve," and they were right. They were right. My ideas don't have to be the only ones, and clearly are not the best always. So whether I'm on paper the leader of the organization, the ideal leader is one who empowers their people and has strong people who they believe in around them, and that makes a world of difference. Makes my job easier as the CEO, and makes their jobs easier. Let them fly, right? And great things happen. Yeah.
And I think you're doing a great job in being a leader of not just the organizations, but Saskatchewan in whole.
Yeah, thank you.
Because when you told us that, if there's somebody who needs help in maybe starting their own business, I'll connect them to somebody. That's empowering
Yep.
a new generation.
Yep.
And I think you're doing a great job in that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's, I'm a believer that Saskatchewan is in an incredibly good spot. Even our discussions earlier about the civil discourse and so on. But most people, there's the fringe on any issue. There's people in sports who are saying, "Oh, the Edmonton Oilers are," I won't give our date away of recording, but they just had a very good night yesterday.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens in a couple of days, who knows? But there's people on the fringe of politics and public policy and so on, and I get that. But I'm also cognizant that the center ground are intelligent, caring people who do want to hear others' opinions. And from that, we'll say, I think maybe I need to move my opinion a little bit on this because there's information I wasn't aware of. And from that perspective, we all get better. We all get smarter. And of course, most importantly, our society gets stronger with other minds. And I think our even though I'm 65 years old, at the end of my career, I'm still sitting here very confident that the people like you two who are young leaders coming up in our community, you're going to do exceptional things. I am not worried that our province is going to hell in a handbasket. I am not worried we will not have an economy or a social network or whatever the case is. We have to do what we can to continue to contribute to that financially and intellectually, if you will. But we also have to support those young leaders who are coming up, and that won't stop as far as I'm concerned. Shouldn't stop in terms of my life. Yeah.
I have to ask Steve this one question. So, being a storytelling podcast, over these past 40 plus years, do you have a story that you can share with us that you've been telling, in like family meetings or something that you still reminisce about?
Well, again, the people that know me would say, "Oh my God, here we are in for an hour of studies." But I don't have one. My grandmother, the woman who was the business person,
Right.
and had a couple of businesses, did very well. She got a little plaque for me that said, "When I do something right, no one remembers. When I do something wrong, no one forgets." And because of my personality, that I would remember, chide people a little when they do something wrong or they, have a particular idea or something. Gently, I hope, never in a nasty way. But so when I would do something wrong, or I would use the wrong word as a little kid or something like that, my family would pick up on it because I would be the one often who would pick it up if they, used the wrong word or whatever the case would be. So I think in my life there's been lots of those little situations where I have had to take it, because I dish it out and I've had to take it, and I've never gotten mad, I don't think, or try not to, when somebody pokes fun at something I've done that's a bit goofy. But the bottom line is, there's lots of family stories that we talk about as kids that we used. I don't know. We just pick on each other in a friendly way. So no great stories, I'm afraid. Nothing that's going to ever make a movie out of it. But yeah.
No, that's fair.
So I want to talk to you for 2 more hours, honestly. But we try to keep a podcast for like an hour.
Yep.
And towards our end of the podcast, we do like rapid fire question.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you 3 questions, Pram's going to ask you 3 questions.
Okay, perfect.
1 word or 1 sentence. Go for it.
Yeah, okay. If you could give one piece of advice to 20-year-old Steve, what would that advice be?
Ask questions.
Cutthroat, straightforward.
Yep.
That's awesome.
If you could make one rule that everybody had to follow, what would that be?
Be nice to each other.
What are you most grateful for in your life right now?
My family, my parents, my brothers and sisters, and my wife and children.
What's your favorite restaurant in Regina?
Angkor.
Oh yeah, I love that.
I've never
place.
been there.
It's in the East End by the Victoria Square Mall, I think. Yeah.
Yep. They could become a sponsor of your podcast now.
Hey.
Yeah.
We'll have fortune cookies here.
Yeah.
So if you could go back in the past or even in the present right now, who would you want to have a conversation with?
My great-grandfather. I never met him. He died before I was born, or just after I was born. He was a homesteader in Saskatchewan, got here in 1882, and I would like to see what he was thinking about and the vision he saw for Saskatchewan. So it'd be my great-grandfather.
And just to follow up on that, like, did you hear any anecdotes from like your dad and your mom and everything? Like,
Yeah, Arcola Avenue here is named after the town of Arcola. The town of Arcola got its name because there was a map maker in the early 80s or 1880s that finished up doing the maps for the area. It was so early on that the train only went to Moosomin, and you got off the train at Moosomin and you took a horse or whatever to walk to the rest of Saskatchewan, pretty much. Anyway, that map maker went to my great-grandfather's homestead night before he was taking a wagon back to the train to go to Winnipeg to drop all his maps. They had a little whiskey, and they talked about war stories. And there's a Battle of Arcola, which is a Napoleonic war in Italy, a battle in Italy, and my grandfather told this story. And the next morning, away they go. 2 years later, my grandfather gets a mail satchel that's appointing him as the postmaster of the postal station Arcola, which is on his homestead. So the term Arcola and the location of Arcola was due to my great-grandfather and this map maker who remembered the story, wrote it down, having a little whiskey on the hillsides of the Moose Mountains 140 or 50 years ago. I think that's a cool, yeah, it's a very cool story. So when you drive down Arcola Avenue, think about my great-grandfather.
Will do. Going forward now.
All right.
He's left a legacy.
Yes, he has. Yeah, and unknowingly, he didn't remember it to any great extent, but yeah, his legacy was there. And many of our legacies are things that we don't recall. It's comments made and podcasts listened to that made a difference to somebody in some small way. That's a positive thing to have as a legacy, isn't it?
And this is like
In a
the
way, it's exactly
exact
the
goal
same thing,
of
yeah.
we want to do.
Yeah.
Like if you even see our logo,
Yeah.
it's like a lighthouse.
Yeah.
And what lighthouses does is throws light for the ships that are in the darkness.
That's right.
And we want to spread stories for people who are in the darkness.
Right. Perfect. It's a great goal. And you'll have people who are on a podcast like this in 50 years and say, my business was successful or my life was successful. Because one time I listened to this podcast, I can't remember what it was, but I learned this. So they may or may not remember the podcast, but they'll remember the lesson. And it's the same thing when you're a CEO or a friend offering those comments of support, or a mother who offers wisdom. It'll come back and be used at some point. Anyway, great.
So the last question, what's something that you didn't used to value, but now you really, really do?
That's a very, very good question as well. I think, well, there's so many things, I suppose. It sounds cheesy and cheap, perhaps, but the time to read. And it's not because I didn't have time to read before, I never took time to read. I love reading. And I've actually got friends, two friends who've just released new books. One is Dr. Raymond Blake about the prime ministers of Canada and how they position Canada through the years, through their speeches primarily. And another fellow just wrote a book that I just got a copy of, Andrew Sloan, about how to work anywhere in the world. And he's got some of the how to do that, because my generation was tied to a desk. Your generation is tied to a laptop. And you could work anywhere in the world. My son works in Germany, and my daughter works off of her laptop anywhere. So the ability to read and learn those lessons and take the time to read them is something I never did because I didn't appreciate the value of it. Now, as I have a little more free time, I sort of give myself permission to say, it's 10 o'clock, it's 2 o'clock, it's 8 o'clock. I'm going to read for an hour. Yeah, it's a valuable tool.
So before we part ways, Steve, any final piece of advice, any final words to our audience, to us, to future young professionals?
Well, certainly to your audience, keep listening, because what you two are doing, I think, is stellar, and full credit to you and your very talented technical team. The other thing I would say is, and I said it before, keep asking questions of friends, of neighbors. What do you do? How did you get there? What's important to you? And we can ask, we ask questions of our friends all the time. How are you doing? I have a friend who used to say, not that good. And only the reason he said that is to make sure people were listening. So ask questions and listen to the answers, right? And now, so that's something I would say often. And look for experiences that are new to you. People say, I don't think I'd like to go to the Sandra Schmerler Center because whatever. No, go and figure it out. Go and try it. Give it enough time, 2 or 3 or 4 times, to learn if you like the place or if it works for your workout habits or your time or whatever. And take the time for yourself in those sorts of facilities. So try new restaurants, try new experiences, go to places where you're going to meet new people. That's how we grow as individuals. And as I said earlier, and I'll say it again, keep asking questions, and from that we learn. And from the questions you ask, other people will learn as well, right? So it's a great life that we have, and we should live it to the fullest, if you will. Great.
I think that's the perfect way to end this podcast.
Totally.
Well, thank you, Steve, for sharing such amazing lessons.
Thank you.
My favorite was the Arcola story
Yeah,
about your great-grandfather.
totally.
I think I'm going to remember this for my whole life.
Well, I'm pleased. He did some good work as a community leader, and so did my grandfather and my father, and hopefully I will, and the rest of my kids as well. But thank you both for having me.
Thank you for being on A Little Perspective, Steve.